Overthinking is not a thinking problem. That is the most important reframe in this video. And if you take nothing else, take that. Because if you believe overthinking is a thinking problem, too much thinking, wrong kind of thinking, thinking when you should be feeling, then you will spend years trying to think better and never solve it. You will try journaling and meditation and cognitive frameworks and talking about it with people and getting more information and doing more research. And none of it will fully work because you have diagnosed the wrong problem. Overthinking is an action problem. Specifically, it is the mind's most sophisticated mechanism for avoiding action while appearing to be doing something about the thing that requires action. This distinction matters enormously. A thinking problem requires a thinking solution. An action problem requires taking action. And the reason the action problem is so hard to solve by thinking about it is that every minute you spend thinking about the thing you're avoiding is a minute you are not taking the action that would end the need for the thinking. The thinking and the avoidance are the same activity, wearing different clothes. Let me show you how the mechanism works precisely, because once you see it clearly, you cannot unsee it. The specific mechanics of overthinking. You have something you need to do, or start, or decide. The thing has some level of vulnerability or uncertainty attached to it. It might not work. You might look foolish. You might fail. You might discover that the thing you've been saying you wanted isn't actually available to you. Something about the outcome is unknown, and the unknown carries a cost. Your mind, which is in the business of risk management and discomfort avoidance, does not want to take the step that would expose you to that cost. But it also cannot simply ignore the thing. It is present. It requires action. Avoiding it entirely creates its own discomfort. So it finds a third option: engagement without exposure. It thinks about it. Thinking about the thing provides the psychological sense of working on it without the actual vulnerability of doing it. You are engaged. You are focused. You are productive. The problem is genuinely receiving your attention. You feel the activity of processing, and none of the risk has arrived yet because you have not actually done anything. This is the specific genius of the overthinking mechanism. It looks like diligence and produces avoidance. It has the texture of problem solving and the function of delay. And because it is genuinely engaging, the questions it generates are real questions. The scenarios it explores are real scenarios. It is almost impossible to detect from the inside as avoidance. The person who is overthinking a business decision believes they are making a better decision by thinking about it more. They are not. They are deferring the exposure that the decision would require. The person overthinking a difficult conversation believes they are preparing. They are postponing. The person overthinking a creative project believes they are ensuring quality. They are avoiding the specific vulnerability of having made something that might be judged. More thinking in each case does not improve the outcome. It improves the feeling of control while deferring the moment of risk. The specific costs of the mechanism. The damage of sustained overthinking is different from the damage of procrastination. Procrastination leaves things undone. Overthinking does something more insidious. It produces the experience of working on things that are never advanced. The overthinking person is not resting. They are occupied. Their mental energy is being spent, significantly spent, on the analysis of situations they are not changing, the rehearsal of conversations they are not having, the planning of actions they are not taking. The cognitive load is real. The output is not. This produces a specific kind of exhaustion that is different from the tiredness of hard work. It is the exhaustion of sustained engagement without resolution. The mind keeps returning to the unresolved thing because the unresolved thing has not been resolved. And each return costs attention and energy that could have been spent on something else. The thing keeps circling not because it requires more thinking, but because the thinking was never the solution. The second cost is more serious. Every cycle of overthinking adds to the accumulation of evidence that the thing is too complex, too risky, too uncertain to act on. The more you think about all the ways it could go wrong, the more the possible wrong outcomes feel probable. The more you simulate the difficult conversation, the more the other person's worst possible reaction feels like the most likely one. The overthinking doesn't just delay the action, it actively builds the case against it. It produces a distorted picture of the risk that makes the original fear feel like confirmed wisdom. Left long enough, overthinking doesn't just delay decisions, it reverses them. The person who is going to start the thing decides the risks are too high. The person who is going to have the conversation decides the relationship can't handle it. The person who is going to take the step decides the time isn't right. The thinking produced an outcome, just not the one that was needed. What actually breaks the cycle? The only thing that breaks the overthinking cycle is action. Specifically, the smallest possible action toward the thing being avoided. Small enough that the exposure is real, but the stakes are survivable. This is not motivational advice. It is the mechanical solution to a mechanical problem. The overthinking cycle runs on the absence of information about the actual consequences of action. The mind fills that absence with simulated consequences, which are almost always worse than the real ones. Action ends the simulation by replacing it with reality. And reality, almost universally, is less catastrophic than the simulation. The specific practice is this: identify the smallest action that would produce real information about the thing you are overthinking. Not the full commitment, not the final decision, the minimum viable exposure. If you are overthinking whether to start the business, the minimum viable exposure is not launching the business. It is having one conversation with one potential customer to find out if the problem you're solving is real to them. If you are overthinking the difficult conversation, the minimum viable exposure is not the full confrontation. It is saying one sentence that moves the situation one step toward the conversation and then stopping. If you are overthinking the creative project, the minimum viable exposure is not finishing it. It is making one imperfect version of the first thing and letting it exist. Each of these produces something the overthinking never produces: information. Real information about the actual consequences, the actual responses, the actual texture of the thing you were imagining. That information changes the parameters of the thinking. Usually it makes the thing smaller. Almost always it makes it more manageable. It never leaves the situation exactly as bad as the simulation suggested. The rule is, when you notice you've been thinking about the same thing for more than one complete cycle, thought, consideration, conclusion, return to the beginning, the next thought should be about the smallest action you can take today, not the solution, the exposure, the question underneath the overthinking. There is usually a specific fear underneath the extended overthinking that is worth naming, because naming it changes the relationship with it. The fear is almost never the surface fear. Not whether the business will work, not whether the conversation will go well, not whether the project will be good. These are the stated concerns. Underneath them is usually one of three things. The fear that you will discover the thing you want is not available to you, that you will try and the world will tell you, directly and undeniably, that you cannot have this. As long as you haven't tried, this remains unconfirmed. The overthinking protects you from the confirmation, the fear that you will discover something about yourself you don't want to know, that you'll find out you're not capable, or not disciplined, or not talented enough, that the person you think you are will be tested and found insufficient. The action would either confirm or disconfirm this. The overthinking keeps it permanently unresolved, which is its own kind of safety. The fear that you will succeed and the success will bring obligations and visibility and expectations you don't feel ready for. This one is the least acknowledged. The overthinking keeps the door closed to everything, including the things that would be genuinely good, because the closed door feels more controllable than what might come through an open one. None of these fears disappear through more thinking. They are specifically designed to be unresolvable by thinking, because they are not about the quality of your analysis. They are about what you're willing to find out. And the only way to find out is to act. You do not think your way past this kind of fear. You act past it. The action doesn't require the fear to be gone. The action happens in the presence of the fear, with the specific understanding that the information you get from acting is the only information that can actually reduce it. More thinking produces more fear. Action produces data. Data replaces simulation. Simulation was the problem. The reframe that changes how you work. When you find yourself in an extended thinking loop about something, and you will, because the mechanism is very good at what it does, the most useful question is not, what else do I need to think about to resolve this? It is, what am I avoiding finding out? That question locates the fear. Not to eliminate it, to name it, because the named fear is something you can act against. The unnamed fear that presents itself as analysis is something you can only think with, endlessly, without resolution. What am I avoiding finding out? Usually you know the answer immediately, and usually the answer, when stated plainly, sounds smaller than the thinking suggested. I'm avoiding finding out whether people will pay for this. I'm avoiding finding out whether this person is willing to be honest with me. I'm avoiding finding out whether I can actually finish something I start. Name it. Then take the smallest action that would give you real information about the named thing. Not tomorrow, today. The action that you take before you have time to generate another cycle of thinking. Small enough to be survivable, real enough to be informative. This is not about ending the capacity for reflection. Reflection is valuable. Careful analysis is valuable. Planning is valuable. The distinction is between thinking that moves you toward action and thinking that replaces action. The former is useful. The latter is the mechanism. Learn to tell the difference. You usually can if you're honest, and end the latter with the smallest possible step. The overthinking will not stop completely. It is very good at its job. But it loses most of its power the moment you stop treating it as thinking and start treating it as what it actually is. The part of you that is afraid of what you might find out. Act anyway. Find out anyway. The finding out is almost always better than the not knowing. That is the entire solution, smaller than the thinking suggested, available today.